Okay. All right, our next presenter will be Juliette Tolley. Her title is Freud's Unconscious and the Collective Pursuit of Hysteria. Please welcome Juliette. No, it's okay.
Oh, present. How much did you get paid this year? Presents are so much more expensive. Things can be so pretty.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Okay, so when you look at this photo, what do you see? You see a sculpture of a body hanging upside down as if it's lost complete control of itself, basically. So now I want to ask, what does an image, or rather, what does seeing a body like this make you think of? And for some, they may see this and think of a body from a horror film, you know, like something that has been possessed by the devil, or other people, you know, they see a body like pulling off the yoga pose that they just like could never get in class, and they're just, you know, consumed with envy for this body. What's interesting about this image, I think, about this body, though, is that any way a person thinks of it, one can be able to relate that conception of the body back to hysteria. And that's what I was interested in studying, is hysteria. So what we think of when we think of hysteria, I think oftentimes people immediately kind of associate it with something like this, which is, you know, like a woman, and you can see in, I don't know, you can see in the caption it says like a woman crying, sobbing, laughing, a woman with no control of herself, and a woman like this, you know, who is experiencing 3 different emotions simultaneously. Or maybe, you know, people think of like every character Kate Blanchett has ever played in a movie. And so this is something that I was interested in investigating. Why is it that we always think of women when we think of hysteria? That was kind of like my initial research question. And this is something that I wanted to investigate, and it started with the history of this disease that sort of leads us to always associate it with the word hysteria. So to answer that, I kind of started with going back to this image, which is actually a photograph of a sculpture called The Art of Hysteria by Louise Bourgeois, and it was made in 1993. The sculpture is well known for its subversion of typical gendering of the hysteric, the immediate association that I was talking about to the female hysteric, placing the curved top frame into an unmistakably male form. Even by the 1960s, the 1990s when this was made, even the explicit association of the hysterical and the masculine jarred with normative expectations. The artist pointedly smooths away any sign of genitalia, emasculating the form and removing the head, so you can see, and which she removes the head, which indicates the absence of reason. But if this hanging form is what I believe a literal and a figurative suspension of a normative historical discourse of madness, of hysteria, something that serves to question how hysteria and emotional disturbance is read, it nevertheless does so through the physical presence of a pained body. This body hangs uncomfortably, allowing the resonance of pain to kind of like creep into our minds. Hysteria, however, subsumed in the language of the unreal or the imaginary, has an embodied sign. It has always been considered a made-up or an unreal, unimagined disease. But the body itself always proves to indicate the truth behind hysteria. The cause of the illness may be in the head, wherever that may have gone. But that notwithstanding, the pain is real. So what do we make of this pain? Louise Bourgeois, the sculptor, she asks us to take seriously the pain experience of the hysteric's racked body, even though the cause of the pain is invisible, a phantom. In the first section of my research, I kind of started with looking into the historical background of the disease hysteria. Starting with the etymology, what does the word hysteria mean, which I found kind of starts in ancient Greece with the word hysterikos, which means uterus. All the way through the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, the Victorian era, and I kind of stalled then in 19th century hysteria in France, where we meet Freud and his earlier mentor, Jean-Martin Charcot. But that was actually just a digression. I'll return to that in a second. The combined historical voices of medical history, the doctors who were talking during all of these different time periods that I referenced, have constantly proclaimed of hysteria. There's no injury, no infection. Lest the body snap, hadn't the hysteric better snap out of it? However, we are challenged not to ignore this anguish because of the unmistakable form the body takes. We cannot ignore it because look at it, it's so disturbing to us. In Paris, during the end of the 1800s, French neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot, who I just mentioned, decided not to ignore the importance of the hysterical body. He made the revolutionary declaration that hysteria was a true disease, an infection of the mind which affected the body. His key argument was that hysteria began as a hereditary disorder, something that was genetic, something that passed down from the mother. A nervous distemper that manifested in the bodily symptoms, contortions of the body. At the hospital he resided at, Charcot influenced the creation of the iconography photography, a collection of now infamous photos of hysterical women, specifically, showing off their symptoms under hypnotism. So these are some of the kind of famous photos we see from the iconography. So these like disturbed, wrecked, pain bodies, the same that we see in the sculpture, but these are actual photographs, right? And in these photos, through Charcot's manipulation of hysterical women, forcing them into experience of bodily pain. So he would use hypnotism to force them into these positions, basically. Like, obviously the hysteria was being experienced, that's real. And the manifestation of these symptoms was provoked by Charcot, which is what I looked into. And so that's kind of where my interest lied. After years, Freud saw these hysterical bodies and learned from Charcot's validation of hysteria as a true illness. But he went away from the idea that it was a hereditary disorder. He went on to study other hysterics, asking them, under hypnosis like Charcot, about their past, allowing them to reveal his theory of hysteria, something that would continue throughout the rest of his life and his career, his commitment to the unconscious, that hysteria is a malady that rests in the unconscious repression of desire, of trauma. So, back to the arch, Bourgeois is undoubtedly tapping into the Freudian analysis of the hysteric. The idea that hysteria resides in the unconscious. But she's heavily overriding the notions of the dysfunctional female sexuality. Freud asserted that hysteria is not gendered because the unconscious has no gender. The emasculated male form here takes both questions and ridicules the tradition of female hysteria. So all this happened in the 19th, 20th century. We're kind of like disconnected from that. And why does hysteria remain so prevalent? Why is it that this word and our associations with the disease stuck with us? My final argument is that hysteria and the revelation of the unconscious was so prevalent and so permeating that it is simply impossible to abandon what history has worked up to press. The idea of hysteria still remains as a female emotion or a phenomenon, but I argue the actual disorder itself still exists today, but in a different form. It no longer is an individual disorder, but rather a collective disorder, malady. Not like this, not like a crowd of people hysterically proclaiming their love for one rock singer or something like that. But instead, it is rather something that all subjects of society are affected with because of ideology. Western capitalist ideology, what we are all living under, I argue, is a form of hysteria because all people are consistently following the ideology of capitalism that insists true uniqueness for each subject because of social media and the free market setup. But the truth is that capitalism creates an unconscious response in subjects to follow the capitalist rule of corporations, like you can see here. Corporations and capitalist ideology insist that people are individual, but the truth is that all subjects are uniform in their unending search for uniqueness. The symptom or the bodily manifestation of hysteria now shows up in the human obsession with the body. Americans' commitment to the gym, to plastic surgery, to generally remaking themselves and their image is itself the symptom of this new form of hysteria. And my concluding thesis is about the negative aggregate effects of people's hysterical unconscious interpolation into capitalist ideology. In conclusion, I'm arguing that if we do not take the time to notice our own hysterical nature, each person will soon, possibly rapidly, lose their own individual subjectivity. We will lose our own volition and our ability to make personalized, unique decisions. And how do we go about creating value in our own lives if we are nothing but hysterical members of a hegemonic capitalist ideology? So to end, here's a quote from Freud: "Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways." I'll leave you with that. So.